morning. Now, I can't see most of you because of the glare of the lights, but I'm excited to be here and excited to see you. I have had the great pleasure and honor over the past year to visit all 136 school districts in Tennessee. And when I stood here a year ago, I walked through a strategic plan and talked about the various things that we would do. Today, I've met personally with a majority of the people in this room. I've visited your hometowns, been in your schools, been in your district offices, and I'm excited to talk about what we are doing. What have we seen that works? Why is it so challenging when we see what works to replicate success? And what should our collective agreement be when we leave the conference later this week? I want to start, as I usually do when I speak, by grounding us in the reality of our current results. I do this because it's the context of our work, and also because it provides for me the sense of urgency to stay focused and to keep moving forward. When I was here a year ago, we did not yet have our 2011 NAEP results. We got them a few weeks after the conference. So I'm going to start by walking through some of those results and then talk a little bit about what we've seen on TCAP and where we're going. And I promise I'll just spend about 10 minutes on some of these slides and then come back and talk, more importantly, about where we're going from here. So when the 2011 NAEP data came out last year, one of the things that I noticed was that while Tennessee's scores for 4th and 8th grade had stayed about the same, they didn't get worse, but they stayed about the same, a number of other states had jumped up. And as a consequence, our ranking moved down a little bit to the point where we're now 46th in the country in 4th grade math and 45th in 8th grade math based on the assessment that happened about a year and a half ago. That's obviously not where we want to be. And like many states, we have the challenge of trying to grapple with very stark achievement gaps from different groups of students. African American 8th graders in Tennessee, only 10% of them scored proficient on the latest national assessment. And only 15% of our free and reduced price lunch students were proficient on NAEP in 2011. And that's the majority of our students in Tennessee. That's obviously a big challenge. It's a challenge that states across the country face. I also, as I traveled, would frequently have people say, you know, I don't think you should keep saying that we're 46th in math. The reason that we're 46th is because we have a lot of students in poverty. But when you look at just students in poverty, if you look at just students who are on free and reduced price lunch, we're still 43rd in math. And we have a number of neighboring states, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, that with similarly situated kids, with economically disadvantaged kids, are getting better results. Now, on the one hand, I think that is an unfortunate reminder of where we were a couple of years ago. But on the other hand, it also gives me a tremendous amount of hope that we can raise ourselves to that level as well. And I think we're doing many of the things that we'll take to do that. One other thing that I wanted to note on NAEP, I had a number of people over the course of last year say to me that the reason our results weren't where we wanted them to be was because of the achievement gap, and in particular the race-based achievement gap. But when we looked, actually white students in Tennessee were scoring 49th in the country in math on NAEP and 48th in reading. Our white students were only outperforming white students in West Virginia in math. So we know that this is a problem that stretches across all of our districts and something that we all have to grapple with as the reality of the context of our work. But we've got a lot of good news too. The good news is we're starting to see very significant growth. Last year, grades 3 to 8, particularly in math and in science, but overall, our TCAP results grew more than they have ever grown in Tennessee. The year before that, they also grew significantly. So we're starting to see the needle rise for students in the lower grades. And in high school, we had very good results last year, especially in math and science. Algebra 1, our proficiency levels went up by 8% across the state. That is a tremendous jump in 1 year in a very important subject. Algebra 2, while our overall results are lower than we would want them to be, last year 10,000 more students took Algebra 2 than had taken it the year before. So because of the hard work that went into building the diploma project, 10,000 additional kids had the chance to take Algebra 2. And many people thought that our results would fall as a result. That having 10,000 kids who 5 years ago wouldn't have taken Algebra 2, having them take it would hurt the results. And the opposite was true. We gave more kids the chance, and those kids did better. And that is a tremendous, tremendous result for us. Middle grades reading, really 5th grade all the way through 10th grade, we're staying relatively static. And that's an area where I think we need to focus on and need to do a little bit better on. But overall, our results on our state assessment for 2 years in a row have been excellent. We have big goals, as you all know, in 2013 for both our overall achievement and for gap closure. We are continuing on the path we laid out in Race to the Top. We're trying to grow results by 3 to 5% in all of our subjects across the state next year. And we're simultaneously trying to ensure that the lowest performing kids learn at a faster rate than other students. That's very, very hard work. That's an ambitious goal. I want to take a second to talk about NAEP, which comes up again this year. So between the end of January and the end of March, a number of your schools have been randomly selected to administer NAEP. And I think it is very important that we take this administration of NAEP very seriously. And I'll be talking more about this over the course of this year. I know historically, NAEP hasn't necessarily been an area of focus because we don't get the disaggregated results back. But I think as a state, we really need to step up and show what we've done over the last 2 years. First of all, doing well on NAEP will help validate our progress. We know that there is much better learning happening in Tennessee schools than 3 years ago, and I think it's important that we show that on the NAEP results. Second, competitiveness. When companies look at where they're going to locate, one of the things they look at are national assessments, and they try to determine, is this a state that's moving in the right direction in education? We need to put our best foot forward. Third, federal funding. Historically, federal funding, Title I, IDEA, it came out all through formula grants. But a big part of the discussion in Washington right now is that some of that formula funding should be turned into competitive funding, should become part of competitive grant making. And to do well in that competition, we need to demonstrate that on national assessments, we are making some progress. And fourth, the same work that helps get us ready for NAEP gets us ready for Common Core. They're hard questions. They're the kinds of questions we're trying to get our students ready for. And I firmly believe that we're going to start to see progress on some of these national assessments. We've put a stake in the ground around a very big goal, which is that by 2015, we expect Tennessee to be the fastest improving state in the country in educational results. We're going to measure that on NAEP, on ACT, and on PARCC. Now, we're not going to go from 46 to first in math. That's not going to happen. But we could be #1 in growth. We could, in 2015, be #1 in improvement. And I think many of the steps that you all are taking in your schools right now give us a fighting chance of getting there. So I'm very excited about our progress. I'm very excited about our potential. And I want to shift now for the remainder of my talk away from the data to talk a little bit about what I have seen as I've traveled across the state, what I've learned from my travels over the past year. My district visits, my meetings with directors, with district staff, with teachers, with school leaders, visiting classrooms and seeing what students are doing. And the data itself have left me convinced of one core truth and lft me with one big question. The core truth is this: we know what works. Collectively, we know what works. And the question is, if we know what works, Why is it so hard to do it every day? So what do I mean we know what works? Well, the examples are right here in Tennessee. Last year, over 50% of our teachers were 4s and 5s on value-added scores. More than half of our schools earned a 5 on school-wide value-added scores. Over 20 districts in the state of Tennessee last year improved proficiency levels by 10% or more in math, 10% or more in a single year. More than 20 districts last year in Tennessee hit their achievement goals while simultaneously shrinking gaps between groups of students. And it's all kinds of districts driving these improvements. It's not just one kind of district. So people sometimes say to me, you can't grow kids who are already at the top of the performance curve. It's too hard. Well, then why did Williamson County, the district with the highest overall scores in the state, also have the highest value-added scores in the state last year? And people will say, you can't improve performance for kids who are living in deeply entrenched poverty. But then I would ask, why did Memphis City last year score in the top 5 in the state in TVAS and have the most reward schools? People will sometimes say, rural schools can't do better because of resources. But then I'd ask, why were so many of our rural schools on the list of exemplary districts last year in the state? Now, this does not mean that the work is easy. It is hard to take the highest performing kids and get them to improve. It's enormously challenging to teach into the headwinds of extreme poverty and help students perform at a high level. It takes incredible skill to work with underpaid staff, to work in a building that doesn't have up-to-date computers, and nonetheless make it happen. This is very, very hard work. It's hard work, but thousands of teachers and hundreds of schools and dozens of districts are doing it extremely well every single day in Tennessee. And from visiting them, I can tell you, we know what works. It's not magic. It's hard, but it's not magic. And here's what it looks like. It looks like bell-to-bell instruction 180 days a year, like I see in Williamson County. It's not just a slogan. Ask a student or a parent in Williamson County about the volume of homework that's coming home and what the expectations are. Visit the schools in Williamson County after TCAP in May, when a lot of schools take their foot off the gas and see that they're still teaching bell-to-bell. It looks like PLCs, real PLCs, in Henry County. You see, Henry County doesn't have the luxury to recruit lots of new teachers. Like many of you, they have to grow their own. And a PLC in Henry County does not look like just joint planning time. It means structure, rigor, data, and an expectation that teachers who are not performing well will improve. What works looks like teachers using student data to drive instruction in Loudoun County. If you walk into a classroom in Loudoun County, you will see a color-coded data wall, obvious to all the students and all the adults. And when you ask a student in Loudoun County, how are you doing? He doesn't necessarily say, I'm doing well. He might say, I'm blue, but I'm 2 questions away from getting to green. Now that's embedding data in the culture of a building. What works is evaluation focused on giving teachers honest feedback and individual improvement plans, like in Knox County. In Knox, the district and school leadership communicate clearly that evaluation is a growth model. It's a growth model for teachers, which means we have to be honest about performance in order to help teachers grow. You can't grow if you don't know what you need to focus on. What works is a culture in the buildings and in the district that says all kids can learn. And there are no excuses, like we see in Lauderdale County. When a child comes to kindergarten not ready for school in Lauderdale County, they don't label the child and lower the expectations. They do the opposite. They increase the rigor in the instruction and the sense of urgency, because that's what works. Now, the things that I noted are not magic. We know they work. So why is it so challenging to replicate them? From my own work and from what I've seen on my travels across 136 districts, I would argue that there are three things that hold us back from doing this every day. One is time and how we spend it. Two is clutter and figuring out how we avoid distractions. And three is capacity and how we build the right teams to get the work done. Time is a very serious issue and challenge. I have challenged, I've done this a number of times now, I challenge any critic of public education to spend 1 week as a principal. 1 week. See if you can take it. See if you could take the hours and the rigor. It is hard to do what we all do in the time that we all have. The best schools haven't added hours to the day, though. They haven't added staff. Here's what they do well. They pick a few key things, just a few, and they make them untouchable. Ultimately, as you all know, your calendar is a reflection of your priorities, and the best schools live by this mantra. They pick those few key things, and they make sure that nobody can touch their time around those things. In my own work, I saw this over the past year for myself. I was spending way too much time in internal meetings and too many hours at Legislative Plaza, with all due respect to my friends in the legislature. So we had to step back and say, what is our priority and how do we allocate our time around it? And district and school visits were my priority. That's where my time had to become untouchable. The second constraint that I talked about is clutter. Clutter and avoiding distractions. For all of us in a time of change, it is really important to say, these things are important, these things are not as important. And that seems obvious, but too often we don't do it because it makes folks mad. It makes folks mad because when they fall in this bucket, they say, what do you mean my thing isn't a priority for you? But not everything can be a priority. I met recently with a director of schools who said, you know, I spent so much time on infighting between two board members about a peripheral issue that I lost track of some key issues with teacher quality. My focus has to change. For me, I had to create a forcing mechanism. You know, when we came here last year, presented a strategic plan that was, I don't know, 50 pages long. Well, you can't have 50 pages of priorities. You can have 3 or 4. So now I have a forcing function. Every quarter, I have to send to my boss, the governor, the 3 or 4 things that I'm going to get done in the next 3 months. I don't get a long list. I get 3 or 4 things, and then in 3 months I have to come back and say whether I got them done or whether I didn't. It's helped bring clarity to my work. And at the building level, we know that leading with focus is a key differentiator between excellent schools and the schools that just float along. In excellent schools, the leadership says, these things are the most important things. These things are less important. The last barrier that I see is capacity. Do we have the right people on the team, and are they doing the right work? We have to have the right people on the team, and we have to get the wrong people off the team. The work is too hard to take any shortcuts on people. It's too important to tolerate mediocrity. I don't care how brilliant your strategy is, or how passionate your beliefs are. You are only as good as the people on your team. For me, this has been one of the hardest parts of my job. Having hard conversations with good people, people who care, who try, but may not be the right fit for that particular position at that particular moment. But if you believe, as I think we all do, that our students come first, then at the state, at the district, and at the building level, we have to take this on. When I think about the things that work, and I think about the barriers, I'm reminded of an experience I had recently. I talked a little bit earlier about Henry County and Loudoun County, and I had the chance a couple of times to listen to each of them present on their work. Henry County presenting on PLCs, Loudoun County presenting on data, and on one of those occasions, as I was taking pages of notes, I looked around and wondered, how come other people aren't writing notes down? And I think the answer is because people think they're already doing this. PLCs, we're already doing it. Check. Data walls, we're doing it. But this is why it's so hard to replicate excellence. Because it's not just about checking it off. It's about putting the time, the focus, and the best people against it as a priority. Here's what Henry County did on PLCs. First, they acknowledged that they weren't working. They had PLCs. They looked at it. They said, these aren't working. Then they said, why are they not working? Let's identify the reasons why they're not working. Well, the first 10 minutes of PLCs are taken up by people coming and not having the materials, and then people go back to their room. Then there's a lack of focus. Then people don't really know what they're supposed to do. And then when they leave, people don't know what they're supposed to do before the next thing. So they weren't working. So they created mandatory structures, an agenda, pre-populated data. Do not show up unprepared. Use every minute. Make commitments to each other about what will come back when you meet the next time. Make a district and a school leadership level to get PLCs right. When people say we do data walls, I wonder if they're embedded in every piece of the culture, like they are in Loudoun County, where every student knows where he or she stands, where every teacher knows how close or far every student is from the goal, where lesson plans reflect the goal to get every student to move to that next level on the data wall. That level of leadership and clarity and focus, that level of district and school leadership commitment, it's the difference between average and excellent. This work is very hard. But right now, I feel like in Tennessee, we are this close to breaking through. I see it on my visits. I hear it from you all. I know it from the data. The answers are in Tennessee. The answers are in this room. And to break through, we have to all commit to being constant learners. Instead of saying, we do this, we've got to step back and say, what more can I learn from these schools and these districts that are doing it and getting slightly different results? We've got to look at our weaknesses, reach out to the schools and districts that are breaking through and say, what is it that you're doing? We've got to learn from each other. Because the answers are in this room, we have an enormous opportunity to learn from each other. This, for me, is what the LEAD Conference is all about. And it's what this work is all about. Thank you for your leadership, for your hard work. Together, I genuinely believe that we're on track to making Tennessee the fastest improving state in the country in education. Thank you.